Dr. Pamjit Pama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on the first reading of the Social Security Legislation Rewrite Bill. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of this bill is to rewrite the Social Security Act 1964, as is implied by the name of this bill. Mr. Speaker, this is to rewrite the bill. That means to tidy it up, reorganize it, make it simpler and clearer to understand. And why is this required? Mr. Speaker, this is required because when the original Act was done, there were 135 sections in the Act. And now, bit by bit, Mr. Speaker, it's grown to 491 sections. And most of the original sections have been amended, and some of those sections have been amended several times. So with those changes and additions, Mr. Speaker, the Act is very difficult to understand, very difficult to follow. And it's a very important legislation for our country. And if people are finding it difficult to understand, people are finding it disjointed, Mr. Speaker, it definitely needs attention, it needs fixing. And that's why we are rewriting this Act. Mr. Speaker, the main social security measures, that is the main benefit, and things related to the main benefit, that is the entitlement, obligation, sanctions, assessment, and right to appeal, will continue to be part of the primary legislation. Mr. Speaker, a number of small policies changes are being included in this bill, and these changes are only to support modern service delivery and improve administrative efficiencies. And Mr. Speaker, the member from the Greens used the word sneaky reform. This bill is not to reform the welfare system. This is just to rewrite the Social Security Act for the reasons, Mr. Speaker, which I have already spoken about. Yes, this is a rewrite, not a reform of the Act, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's rewriting the existing policy to make it clearer, easy to understand. And one thing, Mr. Speaker, I have noticed is that when people get used to one kind of document, for them any change will be confusing. It will take longer for them to understand that document. So this is really good for new users, but existing users, for that this bill is again very good, Mr. Speaker, because this bill makes it clear when provisions continue existing policy. It also identifies the corresponding sections in the 1964 Act in each case so that people can compare it, see where the changes are and what that section was in the original Act. And also, Mr. Speaker, Clause 9, that is about any confusion that can come up about the meaning of a word. And for that, Mr. Speaker, this bill makes it clear that the old law, that is the law as set out in the current legislation, should be used to determine the meaning of that word. So this bill is good for new users, Mr. Speaker, as it will make it simpler, clearer, and this is also good for existing users. And I look forward to working on this bill in the select committee process, Mr. Speaker. I support this bill and commend this bill to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.